Welcome to a Trekzone conversation. Matt Miller with you at Trekzone HQ today, continuing my chat with Axamonitor's Carlos Pedraza, dissecting the latest Axanar news and information. Now, we did record this chat on the 23rd of October, and I decided to split it into two parts. There's been some moving and some shaking over the last week and a half, but everything that we're talking about here in part two is still relevant, is still correct. We've just maybe gained a little bit of an insight, and I'll tell you where to find that insight a little later in the program. But let's roll the opener, have a quick ad break, and then dive into part two of my chat with Carlos Pedraza.
Beaming around the world for over 450 episodes, now on Facebook Watch, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is a Trekzone Conversation.
Well, Carlos, as always, thanks for your time. Now let's dive straight in. Why is Alec Peters' CBS settlement relevant to the Paul Jenkins case?
Alec Peters brought Paul Jenkins aboard, making all kinds of representations about what he was allowed to do and not allowed to do under the settlement agreement. And Paul Jenkins believed him. Paul Jenkins would ask him, "Are you really allowed to sell this merchandise with the Axanar logo? Are you really allowed to sell, these starship models, these starship designs that look like starships, like Star Trek starships?" And he was like, yes, I am. And the settlement lets me, but unfortunately I can't show you because of the confidentiality of the settlement agreement. So he would hide behind that all the time. And so Paul was like, okay, why would he breach an ironclad settlement like this? And so that's why he came aboard. That's why he stayed aboard. It's why he passed up paying work, because Paul Jenkins never was paid for any of his work on Axanar. So he passed up on that other paying work, and only to discover, once he got a hold of the settlement agreement, that these things were not in fact authorized, and so he added a claim of fraud against Alec Peters in that filing on this past Friday, because Peters had told him these things were okay, and if Jenkins had known these things were not okay, he would not have stayed with the production or even joined it to begin with. So that's where the fraud claim comes in, and the documentation to show that it was fraud is where the settlement comes in as well, even though this is technically not about the settlement, because that's between CBS and Alec Peters. But to the degree that Alec Peters used this settlement as a means to lie to Paul Jenkins, that's where it's relevant.
I think it goes to Alec Peters, the person. If you stand back and look at this man who lies, allegedly cheats and commits fraud, but he's still able to bring in top-notch people and convince them that he's doing the right thing. He wants to just do this. I just want to do this, he says so often. And people come on board, they become so enamored, like Paul Jenkins and so many other people, but they eventually see the light and that it was all bullshit. And all Alex said was bullshit. I can only imagine that it'd be a feeling of uncleanliness as they come around from a position of not believing other people like you, me, Sean O'Halloran, and more from the Axamonitor group. And you have to wonder when it'll just become public knowledge that Alec Peters is nothing but trouble.
So to that end, I think what we're seeing, what has changed since the last time you and I spoke, is that these people are no longer just walking away from the production. They're banding together. And so, as I reported last week, Paul Jenkins, Rob Burnett, Christian Gossett, all three former directors of Axanar, who have now left because of Alec Peters and his mismanagement, are going to create a documentary, a 9-part documentary about toxic fandom and how Alec Peters is a case in point, featured example of exactly that. So they're raising money to do that. They've already raised, I think, more than 11,000. I haven't checked in the last couple of days. It's at battlefораxanar.com, and they lay out exactly what those 9 parts of the documentary are going to be, what they're going to focus on, how it relates to bigger issues in society, and where they're going to reveal the truth about what Alec Peters has been doing and how many people he has hurt along the way, and not just people but also their families. That's going to be a big deal because these are 3 well-respected professionals in the entertainment industry who, by virtue of coming together to end this, to shine a light on it, has a real potential for happening. Key to that will be this legal case, because it provides a means to, through discovery, to bring this information to light through documentation, emails, files, etc. And there's a lot of them. So this may be the means to actually bring this to an end, or hold him to account for what he's done and what he's continuing to do. So that's a big piece of news as well, is that they're coming together to do this, and that other people who have been part of the Peters orbit are joining in on that as well. Now that they see this as a real possibility, they're joining in and doing that.
Now, another piece of the Jenkins lawsuit is a small snippet of chat logs from a group called the Troll Hunters. It sounds like a really delightful place. And you have a copy going back to 2017. What has been highlighted in this case?
The pieces that are included in Paul's exhibits talk about, show how they were making plans, definitive plans to take out, and that's an expression that they use in there, take out Sandy Greenberg, who's been one of the longest and most vocal of the opponents of Alec Peters and Axanar after he was sort of, he was thrown out, ejected of the, he was an Axanar supporter who was ejected from all of the Axanar groups because he asked all the wrong kinds of questions, like where's this money going and when are we going to see the film? So Sandy Greenberg has been a real thorn in their sides. And again, I've been going through years of these logs. I was up until 4 o'clock this morning going through them and cross-referencing and making notations and so forth. And they hate him. They hate him. Now, there's a lot of people that they talk about in really negative ways, including me, which I had to laugh about. But
did I make the grade?
I haven't gotten to you yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you're in there because virtually everybody is. I mean, these are years worth of these transcripts, and they talked to each other every day practically. So some of the people who were involved in this, apart from Alec Peters, who was the ringleader, they referred to him as captain and skipper, and he gives them orders and they carry it out. So these people whom we've seen post things in support of Alec Peters and so forth, they're doing it at his behest. They're doing it as part of a collusion with these other people. So among them was Jonathan Lane, his sort of chief apologist and the blogger behind Fan Film Factor, who has many times come to tried to justify Alec Peters' actions and attacked people. He's attacked you. He's attacked me. He sandbagged you in that interview the two of you did, the debate that you did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the incorrectly titled debate.
Yeah, the incorrectly titled debate. So you and I both borne the brunt of his actions. So Jonathan was a part of that group, and other people, Dave Heagney Jr., also known, goes by Hubcap as well, Hubcap Dave. Alexander Richardson from the UK, who is a graphic designer, a very talented one. But man, when you read what he especially says, I mean, it's just bitter and bile, just spit at people that he doesn't like. He uses a particular word to describe John Van Sitters at CBS. He calls him John Van Ers. And everyone pats him on the back for being so clever about his nicknames. And who else is in there? Let's see. I actually have my online notes here on the screen. Lee Questenberry, Reese Watkins, Alec's girlfriend, Crystal Hubbard, a guy named Ben Thaler, who I don't recognize very much, but he's part of that group. Alexander Richardson, I already mentioned, as well as Dave Heaney Jr., Colin Krapp, Jeff Craig, who actually lives here in Seattle or near Seattle with me, and he repeatedly makes intimations about how, I know where you live, and not just me, to other people, even Sandy in England. He's talked about, here's how little it would cost me to fly to England, and he just makes these veiled and sometimes not so veiled threats against these people he sees as Alec Peters' enemies. A guy named Barney L. Cornett and another guy named Paul Vitello. Both have been pretty vocal and fierce advocates for Alec Peters. So we see in Paul's legal filing a portion of these chat logs that go to show how they've been, really making these plans to hurt people. They were literally trying to get Sandy fired from his job because he opposes Alec Peters. Alec even makes a statement like he'd love to have a hitman go after him, but he can't afford one, which is pretty dark, I think. And it's the kind of thing that when you have followers as devoted as many of these men are, plus Crystal, the girlfriend, it wouldn't surprise me if someone took his words too literally. That's how fierce and cultish this group is. Anyway, one of the things that we learn in those chat logs is that Jonathan Lane, who, again, you and I have borne the brunt of his attacks many times, but Jonathan Lane is, and I think you'll agree with me on this, he's a basically decent guy who unfortunately has just tied himself so much to wanting to see Axanar produced that he's done whatever Alec Peters has asked him. And in the Troll Hunters logs, you can see where he literally says, Jonathan, go write this, go attack Carlos, go attack Sean, go attack, Sandy Greenberg. And they do. When you start cross-referencing the timestamps from these logs with what was posted on Facebook, what was posted on Fan Film Factor, you see that he was doing Alec Peters' bidding repeatedly.
I think it really comes down to Jonathan Lane as a person who does a lot for Star Trek fan films, even more so than me, and I often feature fan films done right regularly on the show. But he's there day in, day out with Star Trek fan films, and I think that's where I got sucked in with that so-called debate and looking at that going, well, let's have a civil discussion. You've got a pro and I've got a con. Let's put them together. And that's why I really label it as incorrectly titled. And I did change my title for it as an Axanar fan's perspective, and it could have done with a counterpoint and an anti-fan's perspective or something like that. But publicly on release, calling it a debate, I got panned for that. And I admit that he steamrolled me, and it was part of my decision really to leave the Axanar orbit for quite a long time, only just now recently returning to it. But I guess that's the difference between me and Alec, is that I can take that criticism, maybe not as well. Those people that were there and were giving it to me rightly so at the time would probably question some of my responses, but in hindsight, in the long term, I have taken that on board, and like I was alluding to there, the difference between me and Alec is that I'll take that on the chin eventually, maybe not straight away, but you can still find that 3-part interview, the 3-part fan's perspective, still up on the YouTube channel. But from that, I learned Jonathan's true colours, and I think he's going to be with Alec through thick and thin. He's the chief apologist, and now we have evidence that Alec is dictating the content of Fan Film Factor.
I'm going to take a little bit of an issue with you there, just given what's happened today, the day that we're recording this interview, because, well, one piece of background from these Troll Hunter chat logs, and again, these are public record now because they're in Paul Jenkins' legal filing. There's many more which we're going to be releasing over time soon, but in the parts that are there in the legal filing, you see Jonathan stand up to Alec Peters around these conversations they're having about Sandy Greenberg, like about hurting him in financial and potentially physical ways. And he stands up to this. And I say that to his credit. What happens next, though, is awful. And it's where you see Alec Peters essentially smack him down. He says, "You're Mr. Negative, and your approach of being nice and whatever is never going to work. It hasn't worked. The only thing that has worked is my being aggressive towards these people." And he calls out Jonathan's wife, Wendy, who is an attorney in California, and saying that her wanting to pussyfoot around these detractors is completely ineffective. And Jonathan takes it, and this was now a couple of years ago, and Jonathan has kept supporting him publicly. He's kept justifying things for him, and you have to wonder why. I mean, why would a person stick with a project that insults your wife, that abuses you verbally in these ways? And we were doing a podcast last night in our group, the Real Super Geeks. We had a couple of lawyers on, and we were talking about all of this, and something that sort of came up unexpectedly but naturally in this discussion is the issue of how Jonathan is abused by Alec Peters, and how a battered spouse stays with the abuser, and people who are not in that kind of relationship dynamic will look at it and say, well, why are they staying with them? It makes no sense. If you understand battered spouse syndrome, you understand why that happens. And I really feel like that may be what's going on here, is that Jonathan at some level may be terrified by Alec. He's seen what Alec has done to other people who were loyal to him, saw the light, and left. He insults them, he denigrates them, he defames them, he goes after them financially by filing these vexatious lawsuits that are not intended for him to win. They're intended to drain money from these people's bank accounts through legal costs. And he says this overtly, that's part of what he's trying to do, is to cost them money in lawyers. When he went after Rob Burnett, he didn't intend to win that case. If he did, why would he file it in a state that has no jurisdiction over Robert Burnett? Rob lives in California. He files this in a county court in Georgia, where Rob Burnett has no interests. They have no jurisdiction over him. Well, why would he do that? I mean, he's a trained lawyer. Why would he? I'm not, and even I know that it doesn't make any sense to file a lawsuit in a state where the person doesn't live and has no business dealings. Well, it was because it would still force Rob Burnett to spend money, and he did thousands of dollars on lawyers just to respond to the lawsuit, which was of course dismissed because so much was wrong with it. But that still cost him thousands of dollars. And Alec, to this day, still says he's going to come after him. He's going to refile the lawsuit in California, and that he's coming after Rob Burnett. And this is not normal behavior. Like, he has produced no evidence that the things he says Rob has done, Rob has actually done. He had the opportunity through these lawsuits to provide evidence. He doesn't. There's no contracts. He said that he stole equipment, but there's no evidence of that. And he doesn't need it because he's not trying to win. He's trying to bankrupt Rob Burnett. We've seen him in his lawsuit against Tiana Armstrong, who tried to stand up to him, but the legal costs became so unbearably high that standing up to him, she ended up settling with him. I don't know the particulars of the settlement terms, but I do know that, and you could guess that, at some point the legal costs become so prohibitive that you end up settling. And he's done since then with Tiana Armstrong, who's a prop dealer, and he sued her because she brokered the sale of the Enterprise E filming model from First Contact. And he claimed that he played a role in that, which I don't think he did, but he claims that. And so therefore, he's entitled to a share of the commission that she and others made, the people who actually made the deal. Well, that's settled for whatever terms it was settled on. Well, a couple of weeks ago, he turns around and now is suing two other people, two formerly loyal employees of his for decades, Dean Newberry and Jared Hunt, claiming that they took part of that commission and therefore they now owe him that $100,000 or plus to which he believes he's entitled. Now, these are two guys who don't have a lot of money. They're two guys, and in this, I'm saying this because I've seen their legal filings on this in a Nevada court, which that by itself is a whole other thing. Why he's doing the same thing he did to Rob Burnett. He's suing in a court that may not have jurisdiction against all of the defendants that he names. So Jared, Dean, and their company called Prop Block. Trouble is that Dean is not a Nevada resident. At the time of this deal, which was in the fall of 2017, Prop Block did not exist as a Nevada company. It was a California company. Jared did live in Nevada, so he may have a case against Jared in Nevada, but he doesn't against Dean, and we don't even know what the terms of their agreement was. There is no written agreement. That's the thing you see over and over again with Alec Peters, is there are no written agreements about anything with anyone, including Paul Jenkins, about that would have clarified whether or not his work was a work for hire, whether or not the terms under which they were sharing authorship credit for this. None of that is in writing, and so he has no evidence to put forward about this. So he goes after Dean in California. Dean, he says in the lawsuit, Dean is a Nevada resident. Well, he's not. And you know how he knows that? Because where did he have him served? At his home in California. So he knows this is wrong.
Well, it really does look and smell like this is more about harassment than getting what you're rightfully due or even seeking justice. It seems like he's just out to destroy people. He uses a particular expression too that you quoted the other day.
I will bury you, and that's what he's doing. And they're just the latest in the long list of people. So Jonathan sees this. He sees this happening. He sees how people who formerly stuck through thick and thin with Alec Peters and distanced themselves, and have now distanced themselves, have become targets. And when you read the Troll Hunter chat logs, he says over and over, "I'm going to sue everybody. I'm going to sue this person, that person over this and that." He's just so litigious. For no good reason, and he doesn't need a good reason if what he's trying to do is bankrupt people. As you know, he tried to come after me a year ago, having his lawyer send me a cease and desist over all the falsehoods I'd published at Axamonitor.com, and provided no actual instances of that happening. And that was done purely for intimidation. Fortunately, I have a lawyer. A very good First Amendment lawyer who wrote back and said, basically, there's no justification for this at all. Back off. And they did. Haven't heard a word since. That doesn't mean he won't try to sue me again. But again, as a journalist, I have some things that I'm, some people I can go to help me with this, because it's a First Amendment case. People like Dean and Jared and Tiana and Sandy Greenberg, they don't have these options. They can't go to a big law firm and say, can you represent me pro bono, because this is for the good of journalism. This is just these people's personal lives. And so where I have the opportunity to be represented pro bono, they do not. And consequently, he hasn't come after me again. He may still, he brags about how, he sold his house and he's come into some money, and, now he's going to use that money to sue people. Well, Jared and Dean are the latest on that hit list. Who knows who's next? So Jonathan sees all this. He doesn't want to be on that hit list. He posted, but at the same time, he's making his fan film Interlude. It's almost done. By all accounts, it looks like it's pretty good. And, he made it for around $25,000, and it looks really good. Well, Alec Peters had nearly $2 million and has been able to produce anything like that in 5 years. Well, Jonathan Lane did this in less than a year for $25,000. So anyway, he doesn't want to be a target. He doesn't want to be a target. And even so, he has still taken a position. Yesterday, he apologized to Sean O'Halloran because he was a member of that troll hunters group, and they talked about, they gloated over the fact that Sean's father-in-law killed himself. And, they said, oh, it's karma. It couldn't happen to a better person, and so forth. And, and Jonathan witnessed that as a member of that group. And he stood up and apologized to Sean for that, which I think was admirable. He did not apologize to Sandy, even though Sandy was, the thing with Sean was just less than a page worth of transcript. The thing with Sandy is like page after page after page. No apology to Sandy. So a lot of people, came down on Jonathan about that. And, one of the things I posted and also said last night was that we need to give Jonathan some room to do the right thing here. If all we do is pile on him and say, and basically say, you have to be this prostrate before we'll be okay with you. That's not the kind of room you give to someone who is actually in an abusive relationship. You need to give them room. You need to give them some safe space to go to, because leaving your abuser is psychologically really hard to do. And I will stand up for Jonathan in this. I'm not going to participate in denigrating him anymore. He's indicated he made another post today in which he clearly came out. He'd been maintaining a neutral stance in the Peters versus Jenkins lawsuit. He made it unequivocally known that he condemns that lawsuit. He is not in favor. He's not supportive of Alec Peters in doing so. That's a big deal for him to do. He's never done anything like that before, and is opening himself up to potential abuse by Alec Peters. He still did that, and Sean responded to it. And even though he goes on to denigrate Sean to some degree after that, and this is all on the Star Trek Fan Productions Facebook group, also on Axamonitor Facebook group, Sean, I think, really graciously is saying the same thing I am, that because we talked about this on the Real Super Geeks podcast last night, that, if you look at Jonathan as being sort of in this abusive relationship, are continually piling on him and making fun of him and allowing him to be called names is not helping him. It's not helping anyone. And all it does is divert attention from the person who really is at the center of all of this, and that's Alec Peters. And all we're doing by jumping onto Jonathan is diverting attention from Alec Peters, which is exactly what he wants. He wants to see people because of him hurting each other. It makes him feel good. I'm not saying I won't hold Jonathan accountable, but I am saying that as far as what I'm going to do publicly and what I'm going to encourage other people to do publicly, is that the making fun of him should stop, that calling him names should stop. We need to give him room. We need to give him time to do the right thing. And I hope that he will. I want to do whatever I can to make that possible, because Alec Peters is the villain here.
Well, I think everyone eventually realizes who Alec is, what he's doing, how he's doing it, and just the sort of person that he is. And they eventually walk away from him, leave him, whether that takes months, years, or even decades.
And they remain terrified of him, Matt.
Yeah.
They do. I can't tell you how much information I have about this man from sources who say you can't use it. You can't do it in a way that lets him figure out it was me who told you, because they're terrified of him. That's what he does to people. I don't understand it because I'm not afraid of him. But like I said, I have resources open to me that help protect me. I have the First Amendment. I have the law. I have access to lawyers that other people don't. So it's easy for me to take that stance. It's hard for everyone else. And that's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Well, if we had more time, Carlos, we could analyse this in the current world climate. Does having Trump and others as leaders of countries, has it created this world, in America specifically, the world in general, where people like Alec can thrive, creating an environment around them that isn't good at all? It sucks people in and won't let them escape, much like a black hole. They just can't see this as a bad thing. And I feel like I'm coming back into this orbit after about 18 months because there's so much information coming out. The more people leave, the more information is being revealed about Alec's inner circle. What I don't understand is how this is still going on 5 years later.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are, and they're correct in this. Like, why do you keep up with this? Why do you continue? The lawsuit's over. The settlement is there. It's just two little short films. Why are you continuing to spend so much time and effort on this? And I think, once you see the human destruction left in its wake, that's part of the reason. And I think what you just elucidated so well is exactly what this documentary is supposed to be about. It's exactly what is driving this lawsuit by Paul Jenkins, because it's not just Paul Jenkins versus Alec Peters. It is Paul Jenkins is in a position to carry the water for so many people who are terrorized by Alec Peters, because he has a lawsuit and he has a legal means to hold him to account for what he's doing to people. And there's hope there. And I think that, yes, it is indicative of what is wrong in so many ways with the world right now. But it's also indicative of the fact that people can stand up, people can hope, people can take action, or they can support others who are taking action. This is what's happening now. And people should consider whether or not they want to contribute to that. Because these three guys, these three directors, they make things, they create things on time, on schedule, on budget. And if you want to put your money into something where it's actually going to produce something that can make some real change in the world, that's something you may want to continue to or contribute to or support.
Well, they're at battleforaxanar.com, and I've reached out. Hopefully we can have a chat about that documentary and the real motivations behind it as well with those three people, Christian Gossett, Robert Meyer Burnett, and Paul Jenkins. And of course, for all the information on the goings-on, Axamonitor.com is your website. You can get a deep dive where it's been going on for 4 years, something like that. It's all pretty blurry at the moment.
It blurs lines. So if people want to sign up for my newsletter, it comes out on, I won't say most mornings because I don't have enough time to do it every day, but I try to keep it to 5 to 10 minutes worth of reading on the days that it comes out. Just go to Axamonitor.com, go over to the menu where it says daily newsletter, and click there and you can get access to the last 30 issues, as well as sign up for the mailing list so that you get this information first, and keep up with it.
Fantastic, Carlos. Well, I think I'm back in the orbit now, as I said, after about 18 months away, back in the Axamonitor group, seeing what's happening on a daily basis. It's just absolutely incredible. So there's more details, more coverage to come here on a Trekzone Conversation. Looking forward to catching up with you again. You're our go-to guy for all the latest information on Axanar, Carlos. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for beaming in, mate, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, Matt.